Today's Pacers prospect breakdown is going to be about a guy who can almost touch the rim just by standing and reaching straight up in the air. Mark Williams, the center from Duke, will break down his skills, his size, and everything you need to know about his game on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News, entering my 5th season on the beat. And today, we're diving into another draft prospect, a center, one of the best centers in this class, and a guy with freakish size, Mark Williams, the center from Duke. For those unaware of what I'm talking about, 7'2" in shoes, 7'6" wingspan, largest in the draft, 9'9" standing reach, almost touching the rim without jumping. Huge player. Very fascinating prospect. Because of that, you probably watched him a lot in the NCAA tournament. And a guy who did watch him a lot beyond the NCAA tournament, probably all of his 2-year games at Duke, JJ Jackson, host of Locked On Duke. JJ, what a year for Duke. 4 guys who could go in the first round, 5 who could get drafted, and Williams is one of those guys, one of the top of those guys.
Yeah, Tony, thank you for the invite here. Excited to talk a little bit about Mark Williams. I'm not that tall. I can only imagine what life would be like to just stand. It's like our days back with the Little Tykes hoops. You know, what that truly feels like to watch Mark Williams dunk a basketball and be that dominant. So I'm excited to chop it up with you here, Tony, today.
Did you ever lower your rim on your driveway to like 6 feet or something like that?
You had to.
What it is. Yeah.
You had to. I don't know that you were playing pickup basketball in the backyard if you didn't. I mean, that's the way to do it.
See, that's how he is just existing, which is it's crazy to think about. And that is sort of the basis of, when I went through and watched the tape of Duke for a few games, and I got lucky with the Duke guys because you scout Bank Carroll first, and you're like, oh, I got to watch all the rest of these guys so much already. So I've gotten a lot of Mark Williams time in, and it's just crazy how imposing he is. Like, so much of the skills he's good at is stuff that is based on the fact that he is just bigger than everyone else. And sometimes you could say that that's a concern, but in this case, even at the NBA level, he will still be bigger than most guys. Like his size is that eye-popping, and that's what makes most of his high-level skills so high level. But the main one to me that I want to talk about first here is his defense, really right around the basket too, but just because he's such a deterrent, he's so huge, he's so locked in on guys backing down and is good at just arms straight up. He doesn't have to jump that high to block shots, right? So he knows he doesn't have to swing his arms. That is where I feel like his size and his skills are the most imposing on the court. Is his defense right around the basket is so good, maybe the best in college basketball this past season.
No, that's where you got to start when you talk about what he was able to do defensively, being an anchor for that unit for Duke. Just some numbers to go for Mark Williams. 4.8 were his numbers in blocks per 40 minutes in a basketball game, an 11% block rate, according to Ken Palm, which was 17th in the entire nation. You don't see that often coming out of a program like Duke or some of those blue bloods because they're so big already. Oftentimes, the players that you see with the best numbers defensively in that block rate department in college basketball come from those smaller schools when they've got more room to work and that sort of thing. That's not the case when, Tony, as you said, Mark is out there on the floor and it's NBA guys who are surrounding him playing for Duke this past season. But his ability to cover so much ground, his timing, all of it was just outstanding to watch him truly be a defensive anchor.
Yeah, on the flip side on offense, how the size kind of plays into his skills is, first of all, on the offensive glass. Like, so strong and good at grabbing them off the rim. Close misses, he's got them. And that sort of plays into not just his skills on the glass, but he has good hands, which for a lot of tall guys, they like Miles Turner has this problem for the Pacers right now. For example, he doesn't have the best hands, right? That makes him harder for him to be a lob threat. It's harder to dime him up on rolls. And, Mark Williams, we'll talk about his pick and roll game. Not the best roller, but he has good hands when the ball is thrown his way. So when he's already huge, that's awesome because he can finish so well around the rim. CBB analytics, 79.3% at the rim this season. Insane. 138 for 174 from within 4 feet. Really good in the lane, 40 for 71. Like, he's got good touch. So because he can catch everything and he's bigger than everybody, hey, look, an easy shot has appeared for Duke basketball.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked a little bit ago about the Little Tykes hoops, and you want to know what it's like to be that tall and to dunk and that sort of thing. The same is said for the basketball size, right? Often when we're in that position, Tony, like we're palming the thing, we're nearly wrapping our entire hand around it. And when you see somebody as big as Mark Williams with the real size basketball, that's what he's able to do. And for whatever reason, sometimes it can be tough to catch for some of those other guys. But being able to clean the glass, get Duke out and running offensively was something that Mark was so great at. His freshman season, the very last game of the year that Duke played, it was a win in the ACC tournament against Louisville. After the game was over, positive COVID-19 test came out, and Duke had to cancel their season right then and there. And there was question whether or not they would make the tournament at all, but that's a whole nother story. That last game of the year to end his freshman season, Mark Williams went out with 23 points and 19 rebounds. A bit of a slower start getting adjusted to the college game and realizing at that level that you are that big, that you can move your body that well. But rebounding was something that he was obviously able to do. 19 rebounds to end his freshman season. Wow. And that only carried over into the sophomore season where he was so epic, finished at 7.4 per game. Paulo's cleaning up the glass with him as well. So, what a terrific rebounder he is.
It's fascinating to look at his dunk stats to the extent that dunk stats are a thing. Attempted over 100 dunks in one season, which is crazy. 95 dunks this past season for Duke. Let's just contextualize 95 made dunks since 2008, which is Bartovic's database, basically. 8 seasons of guys with over 95 dunks. Taco Fall, NBA player. Udoka Azubuike did it twice. First-round pick. Montrezl Harrell, first-round pick. Bam Adebayo, first-round pick. Lottery pick and a stud. Obi Toppin, first-round pick, lottery pick, and a stud. And Anthony Davis, along with Mark Williams. Pretty good crew in terms of college players. Most of them translated. Like, I know dunks are just a simple thing, but when you're able to get them so easily because of your size and hands, like that generally says a good thing about your skills.
And his dunks were my absolute favorite. And yes, a lot of that is because I look through Duke glasses when I watch any basketball game now, but also watching Mark Williams dunk a basketball, the ability to palm the basketball the way he does. When he actually throws it down, he's one of those guys that he wants to rip the rim off when he's finished with it. And that's epic to me. I wish I had the ability to do that on a regulation level. So he's a ferocious dunker for sure. And, his range extended a little bit as well. As I'll kind of shift our conversation there, Tony. The number that really stands out to me is that Mark finished the year at a 72% free throw shooter, 72% from the floor. There is only one player in college basketball this season that shot greater than 70% from the floor and greater than 70% from the free throw line, and that was Duke's Mark Williams. Only one guy did that, greater than 70 at both the free throw line and from the floor, and it was Mark Williams. A lot of those are dunks, which is easy to make it if you're able to dunk it the way he was. So a great offensive display this season for Mark Williams.
Yeah, the free throw shooting is very encouraging, especially because he grew a lot in that area from year 1 to 2, right? That's always even more so encouraging if you're an evaluator. Because then, one of the ways to stop a guy who's just more physically imposing than you is to foul him. Well, you can't really do that necessarily against Mark Williams because he might actually make both. He's a good free throw shooter. Speaking of that, where did you see, because a lot of his hype as a lotto guy, maybe even a top 10 guy, came from this past season, obviously, when he was a starter and very good. But where did you see him grow the most, or how did he grow from his freshman year to his sophomore year with the Blue Devils?
Definitely just his offensive ability, to put himself in the right position. Right positioning is so much of it. Duke as a team look this season was improved. I mentioned his freshman year for Duke basketball. The last time Duke did not make the NCAA tournament was March of 1995. And in that 2021 season, Duke missed the tournament, which doesn't seem possible. That was the first time in my lifetime. I mentioned 95, they miss it. November of 95 is when I came into the world. So I missed the last time that Duke missed the NCAA tournament by a few months there. And so in 2021, Duke was just a lot of weird parts put together. Matthew Hurt was there and more of the stretch big on the outside. And it was kind of difficult for him and Williams to coexist on the floor together. This season, Paulo being the player he was, I think also helped Mark Williams' comfortability there and positioning on the offensive end of the floor. I think that's why you saw an increase in production and what he was able to accomplish.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about Duke not making the tournament. I kind of forgot that happened.
It happened. I didn't. I want to forget that happened, but yet it's ingrained in there for me. I did not know that you could play an NCAA tournament without Duke because, as I said, March of '95 they didn't have it. I came into the world in November of 95. I was like, there's no way you could play the big dance without the Blue Devils. And they did.
As an Indiana graduate, don't take it for granted because they used to be a
Yeah.
mainstay and now they are not a mainstay, to put it nicely. So
No
don't
doubt.
do not take it for granted. Any strengths you feel like, or any really obvious like this is what makes him a lottery prospect, things that we didn't talk about?
Just kind of the defensive end of the floor. I mean, you talk about the pedigree of Duke men's basketball. We're joking about not going or not missing the NCAA tournament in over 25 seasons. That's nothing to be taken lightly. You talk about this Duke basketball team. Mike Krzyzewski, I know people in Indiana have heard of the guy, Coach K, and says before the season starts that this is going to be my last year as a head coach before I retire. So the inherent pressure that's then on this basketball team to go on and win make it all the way to the Final Four, to win the ACC regular season championship was really impressive. To win Defensive Player of the Year award in a conference like the ACC, and then to finish the season with the fourth most blocks in single season Duke history was unbelievable. The guy who has the 1, 2, and 3 in single season blocks for Duke basketball is Sheldon Williams, the landlord, who had an NBA career and a run there. So Mark Williams was definitely in elite company and is going to be the next big in the life of Duke basketball to excel at the NBA level, I believe.
Hey guys, let's take one short little break here so I can talk to you about rockauto.com. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models of vehicles, it is so hard for your local chain auto parts store to stock the parts you need. You got to go in there, try to find what you need. It's never in the aisle. You think it is. The guy has to come help you find it. A lot of times they don't even have it. Then the guy behind the counter is going to ask you a bunch of questioning that you don't even know. Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX or a CX? Then you got to wait because they got to order the part anyway. Then you got to go back and get it. That's all a pain. Why would you do that? You have a computer with access to rockauto.com at home or in your pocket. You can save time and money when doing so. Why spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same auto parts from that chain store or dealership when you can save all that money at rockauto.com? They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are always reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you could need for your vehicle right on their tail lamps, motor oil, new carpet, brake parts, you name it, they got it. Go explore their easy-to-use website today, rockauto.com, to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go check them out right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you when you're checking out. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. So he's interesting because his flashes, his bright flashes are so high and his tools are so imposing. He is, again, enormous, a huge player, and that trait will always be there. He will always be huge. That said, he is a flawed player, or else he'd be considered one of the top easily 5 guys in this class. So on the weaknesses side, there are a couple places I could start here. But I will say his skills with the ball are where I will start. Like, doesn't dribble hardly ever. Let's back up for a second. Coach K never asked him to dribble.
Right.
I'm not going to, it's not like he should have been handling the ball, but his handle's not very good. He's not going to dribble that much. He doesn't do any really ball skills besides catch dunk. And those are good things to do. That's not a criticism necessarily of catching and dunking. But like a lot of times was talked about with a guy like Rudy Gobert. And I'm not comparing the players, but Gobert can catch and dunk, but he doesn't have a lot of range. He doesn't have a lot of stuff he can do with the ball in his hands besides finish a play. And I feel like Mark Williams struggles at a lot of the same things. Once he's more than about making up this, but like 8 feet, 9 feet from the basket, he's kind of pitch it out or set a screen because he doesn't really have a package of moves to create his own shot necessarily.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely where you start with ways that Mark Williams could improve offensively. I appreciate you putting out there the disclaimer that he wasn't asked to really dribble the basketball as much and to create as much in space there. But I do think that there is a role in the NBA, as we've seen over the last decade now, looking at basketball for a guy that can be your lob threat at the rim, and you're going to get excellent defense. And I do believe that's what you're going to see from Mark Williams. But if he were asked to put the ball on the floor a little bit more, that's absolutely something that he can improve on.
I'd be curious how he looked at just like a traditional post up. They happened at Duke every so often, but like Banchero was way better at them. So,
right.
They didn't, especially when you're starting with 4 other NBA guys, like you don't need to do anything but dive to the basket and dunk. So I am curious how his skills with the ball will translate. Like, can he ever be a guy that can extend out? Because, this is the same problem that Duren's going to have they don't project as shooters right now. And they, both shot free throws well. Durant took some long twos. So maybe they'll be like sort of stretchy, but in the NBA, that really matters if you're able to pull the defense out or just be limited in the dunker spot or to screen situations. And I feel like Mark Williams, as of now, kind of projects to be a guy who can't really stretch it out and is kind of limited to the screen situations. That still can be a positive player. Kevon Looney can't shoot at all, and he's been awesome in this postseason and in the finals for the Warriors. So it's not like a death knell or anything, but it is still very important. And the fact that he doesn't have that skill is at least near the top of the list for concerning things for him right now.
No doubt. There was a big NCAA tournament game for Duke. I think it was the round of 32 against Michigan State, if I remember the game correctly, where Duke had just a few seconds left on the shot clock. And on a bad inbound, Mark Williams kind of ends up with it in the mid-range spot and does a turnaround jumper. Somehow, some way, it went in. And I think we're more surprised that he actually attempted the shot, because that just wasn't something you saw him do quite frequently. And then it goes in, and you're like, oh, wow, this is awesome. And Duke goes on to win the game. But to just see him feel more comfortable to take those shots or be given the opportunity to do so, I'm really curious to see what that would look like. And I do think that's something that you clearly need to put a lot of time into the gym if you want to excel at it.
Yeah, so something else, I don't know how to view this necessarily because, again, standing reach is insane, wingspan's crazy. He does sort of get like a half step away or a step away from where he's supposed to be on defense a lot. Like an area where if he was 6'10", he would get beat or there'd be a basket for the other team. Now, it didn't matter a lot, but in the NBA, that might matter when guys are faster and bigger. So I do think, he was able to make up for it all the time. Again, his block percentage was nuts. He's a great defender, but he does have a tendency to like not be in the right position, especially in pick and roll situations a little high up. And again, another thing you have to talk about with all these caveats is, maybe that's what Coach K was telling him to do. But either way, he couldn't recover all the way on a lot of those. He got a lot of blocks, but in the NBA, that will be even harder to overcome. So I'm curious about his defensive positioning because I wouldn't call him immobile, but I wouldn't call him like fast or speedy either. So it's hard to kind of put those all together for me, but I do feel like at times his defensive positioning could have used a little kick in the pants.
Yeah, just it's having these conversations, Tony, and kind of thinking back to watching Duke this season and then, growing up as a big sports fan, I think about the jobs that general managers are tasked with, not only in the NBA, but the NFL. And at one point in my life, I might have said, hey, I think that'd be kind of cool to be a general manager. And then you really get into it and you have to consider the things like, is a coach telling you to do something like this? And then I think you get into a land of where you overthink it and that sort of thing. That's why I'm so glad I don't have to make selections like this that can define careers. But I do believe that there is some validity to what you're saying there with the positioning. It helps that the wingspan is as large as it is, as you said, a 7'6" wingspan for Mark Williams to be able to recover if you weren't in the best of spots. That's something that's going to need to be improved on. But I do think it's fair to give him the opportunity to learn it a little bit, to get that opportunity to develop.
I bring this up a lot. I cannot remember where I heard this originally. I want to say Nate Duncan's podcast, but like he categorizes defense into can't, won't, and doesn't know how. Right. So you never know when you're drafting these guys what group they're in, right? Like, well, Mark Williams, is it a won't be a good position on defense kind of guy? If so, that's the worst one. Is it can't right now? Then you can fix that. If it doesn't know how, that's the best you could teach. So you never know.
Heard it broke down that way before, but I love that. That's so true. I'm going to use that.
So I love that too. And so that is part of the gamble, though, you're taking with prospects. Is like, I can say that it could be one of those 3 buckets. I don't know what bucket it is.
Right.
So if it's a doesn't know how, oh my God, this guy could be like a top 5 defensive center in the NBA. But if it's a can't or a won't, all of a sudden you got to say, well, why not? Or how do we fix these sort of things? And I think the way you see his defensive positioning, again, monstrous defender, but the way you see it the most pop up in like his stats specifically is the fouls. Like, because he's out of position, sometimes he had to foul a lot. That was I believe it was the national championship game, or was it the semifinals where he played like 10 minutes?
The Final Four. It was the Final Four and against North Carolina, the best rivalry in college basketball. And he's asked to sit on the bench because he gets in foul trouble so quickly. That was disastrous. Really changed the course of the game. And clearly a lot of fouls in that game that I think Mark Williams wishes he could go back and be in the right spot so that he's not having to recover as quickly and to get into foul trouble. I clearly haven't gotten over that loss, Tony. That's North Carolina in the Final Four to end Coach K's career. That was tough.
I should have just found any other game he had 4 fouls in and brought it up instead of that. But everybody remembers that game.
Yes.
It's a little more high profile. Yeah, and I get confused because I'm used to 6 fouls being the foul out on the pro
Right.
level. So I look at his per 40s and I'm like, oh, 3.9 fouls. That's not that bad. Oh wait, he comes out one earlier because Coach K
Right.
has 5 to work with.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot. So
Yes, no doubt.
that's part of the defense I think he'll have to clean up. The last thing I want to mention here, and then I'll throw to you for just a broad thought on potential weaknesses. His screening is fascinating because he's huge, so they're good, and he gets his arms wide and all that. He is so eager to roll to the basket that he doesn't make contact sometimes. And he has to get really close to be a threat. So, like, basically, after he screens and before he gets to about 8 feet away, no one is paying attention to him. Like, he's got a lot of space to catch. And then when he catches, he doesn't dribble that much, like we talked about earlier. So, his pick and roll game is something I'll be really interested in the development of, because if he can't really improve, like with any sort of simple pass at the free throw line or any sort of one dribble basket, he's going to be kind of limited in what he can do as a screener just because he can't catch it unless the ball handler attacks the rim at the same time.
And clearly, again, something that you said, you've got to be able to execute at the next level. That's just paramount if you want to be able to stay out there on the floor. Thinking back as to what Duke was able to do offensively with all their weapons out there, Paulo having the basketball a good bit in his hands, the guards that Duke had between Trevor Keels and Wendell Moore Jr., Jeremy Roach, who's going to be going back for his junior season at Duke, and then AJ Griffin always occupying the corner for the Blue Devils. Typically, I'm really curious what Mark Williams was thinking in a lot of those instances, because you're right, it did feel like he's playing college basketball. There is such a major discrepancy in size compared to what you're going to see at the NBA level. I personally would be eager as hell to get to the basket, knowing that I've got some mismatches down there. So I just wonder if it's a little bit of eagerness from Mark in those settings.
I can't remember. I think it was Pitt. There's a possession where he rolls off a screen and then Keels throws him the ball and he catches like 15 feet away because no one is between him and the basket. So he can score, but he doesn't catch looking at the rim because he's not used to it. He catches it, kind of turns and looks to the wing. It's like, oh, I could just dribble and score. And then he dunks. And so, those kind of habits, or if his playmaking improves, will be something he has to build up as his game translates into the NBA. Any other kind of weaknesses in general? I feel like the big one's going to be, can he ever space out? But any weaknesses you feel like we didn't highlight or didn't touch on enough here?
Yeah, I think like we talked about, spacing is such a big thing, and I've talked about this a good bit with other folks who have asked to preview Mark Williams because he is such a big-time prospect coming out to Duke, or even talking about the offense of Paulo Banchero and the other guys of what they could be, keeping in mind that floor positioning on the offensive end of the floor in college basketball is so much different than it is at the NBA level. The three-point line is much closer and that sort of thing. So there's not just as much ground to cover. So from the quickness perspective, I don't know wholeheartedly what you're going to get out of Mark Williams on that end. And I think that's only something that time's going to be able to tell, certainly once you get into the NBA floor in that setting, because it is a good bit more ground to cover once you get to the professional levels.
One more break here, guys, so I can talk to you about Built Bar, who are making the best tasting protein bars ever. And they have a new caramel brownie flavor that's just awesome. If you love a good chocolatey, chewy brownie, that's the way to go. What is Built Bar? They are protein bars that are 100% covered in chocolate and basically taste like a candy bar. And they come in so many good flavors. You can get like peanut butter in them or the caramel brownie in there. They have fruit infused ones. They have a really delicious cookie dough one. My favorite is the peanut butter brownie. But they're protein bars that don't taste like, as Nate Duncan says, you're chewing the inside of a sawmill. They're delicious candy bar tasting protein bars. They're also super healthy. For example, the new caramel brownie flavor I was just talking about, 130 calories, 17 grams of protein, only 4 grams of sugar. Basically a regular brownie replacement. And the best part, again, all 100% covered in real chocolate, made with collagen protein that your body absorbs more efficiently, and you still get a bunch of health benefits. Tons of listeners have told me they tried them and absolutely loved them. You should be next. Go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order of Built Bars. That promo code again is LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you for the unintentional segue there, JJ, to talking about the pro level, how his game will translate into the NBA. And with centers, that can take some time because that's a hard position, especially in the current NBA where you're changing coverages a lot and you're involved a lot in the most common action in basketball. You got to learn stuff quick, and a lot of them don't, right? Isaiah Jackson, for example, from Kentucky. You didn't hear that because you covered Duke, but from Kentucky, Pacers drafted him, and he had some brilliant moments as a rookie on defense. He also had some head scratchers because he's learning. It's hard when you're playing the 5 in the NBA versus playing the 5 at Kentucky or whatever at college basketball to change what you're doing. And most of that is spacing. But centers are just very interesting to kind of project because random things can make them awesome. Like Isaiah Stewart, no one thought he'd be good. His motor's just insane, and he is clearly a fringe lottery level guy from the draft. He was in with Detroit. Like, you just never know with bigs. So when I start these discussions about NBA fit, I usually say, how will this guy fit in a stretched out, faster game? So on one hand, Mark Williams around the basket defense being so strong, and Miles Turner's on the Pacers. Like, that is super valuable. The Pacers know that firsthand. Is awesome, but a more stretched out game will also make it more taxing for him to be a guy who can be a step late sometimes. Where do you feel like his game will translate, especially on that defensive end of the floor?
I think it's got to be pretty high. I think his ability that, like we said, to be such an elite rim protector the way he was, and particularly you talk about fits with a team like Indiana going into a situation where you've got a great player like Miles Turner ahead of you to be able to teach you some things and to learn on the fly to get those opportunities. I think he's going to be able to excel and improve on the defensive end. I'm really not that concerned at all at what he's going to be able to be defensively. I think he's going to be great on that end.
I think he will be, because I think he'll be able to defend pick and rolls a little better at the pro level. I just bumped my mic. Excuse me, everybody. So I think that, at first, especially things like drop where he has to cover two people at once, or, when he's high up, if he's playing against like an elite ball handler, yeah, he'll struggle for probably a couple years. But I think he'll be really good on that end when he does level up. Like, I think it'll take him, like Bam was a good defender right away, but he didn't evolve to a great defender until he could kind of defend 15. I don't think he'll be like Bam level, but it took Bam like 4 years to be that level of guy. I think it'll take Mark Williams about that long. The offensive translation is obviously where everybody's going to have worries with him because, like we talked about, can't stretch it out as much. And there are blueprints for guys who can't shoot at all and don't have the ball in their hand all the time that are still successful. We just talked about Looney earlier this show. We talked about Gobert on this show. Again, not comparisons, just talking about the situation. I would be a little worried as a pro team, but I also think because he's so huge, there are ways that you can hide him and just say, hey, this guy's huge. Let's just throw him the ball. Like, you can't switch onto him. You cannot put a small guy on him because he can just back him, put their butt under the rim. So I think that you can't switch on him, which is an advantage, but I also think it might be a little harder on that end to fit him into an NBA ecosystem, especially the first couple of years.
Yeah, it's just going to take time to process and develop and to get better at a lot of those things. And obviously, we mentioned going from the college game to the NBA game. It's just to a whole nother level. I think when you talked about the defensive coverages that can come in the pick and roll setting, that's clearly something that I think back to that Final Four game that we said at the end there. Mark Williams got switched on to Caleb Love, who hit a big-time three at the very end of the game, and Duke fans are going to be seeing that shot for the rest of their lives. And I move on. But with that being said, I think the older he gets, the more experience that Mark Williams gets playing basketball at a high level. Again, just 2 years at Duke, still a really young guy that's going to get the chance to play for an NBA team, learn, develop, get better defensively. Like, that's what excites me the most about seeing where his professional career could start.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I think it can get good on that. And like, even if he just gets, I'm trying to think if there's any big who has this shot like as an obvious mainstay in their game. There's not a lot of them, but just like I hate to go back to Bam again, but Bam got like a 10-footer and like it really evolved his offense. But what Bam got really good at too is passing. If Mark Williams can become a passer, I think that could really help him blend into offensive ecosystems, just because then you could make him a linchpin at the elbow, or it's harder to then just sag off of him completely because he's making decisions with the ball. With the Pacers specifically, I don't know how much you kept up with them because they had no Duke last year, I believe, after dropping off Cassius Stanley and making a billion trades at the trade deadline. They're gonna play fast, for sure, with Tyrese Halliburton running the show. So I think that we've seen Miles Turner fit into their system they have now. I think his defense will fit into Carlisle's stuff, no problem. I also think that his offense as a lob threat, for example, with Tyrese Halliburton, could be great. But as a team that's going to be playing, let's go transition. We have the ball. Okay, we're going to have the fastest possession in the league. I don't know if they'll be the fastest team, but one of that is going to be a tough fit for him right away, definitely. So I do think in terms of skills and needs, if Turner, who has 1 year left on his deal, is not on the Pacers going into 2 seasons from now, they could use a guy like Mark Williams. But, especially now that they have Gogan, Isaiah Jackson too, it might make some move for him to be a natural fit. And I don't think the Pacers would pick him at 6. They'd probably move back if they picked him. But if he did end up on the Pacers, I think he would fit with what they want to do. mainly on defense, but I think it would take some time for him to keep up with the speed they would like to play with on offense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's something that's got to improve for any player, and to be that big, you're
Yes.
certainly asking a whole lot. I'm glad that we went in this direction sort of here at the end, Tony, because I wanted to talk about the fact I feel bad that I've waited so long to get to this point, but we mentioned the measurables for Mark Williams to be 7'2", to have that 7'6" wingspan, to have the 9'9" standing reach, 5.4% body fat for a guy that large,
Wow.
that bit. Like, conditioning is something that he does take a whole lot of pride in. And if that were to continue, again, to be that large and to have that body percentage, I'm envious of that. Nowhere near that size. I do think that has to be an added bonus and a benefit to Mark Williams to make you feel a little bit better. It would be a whole lot worse if this was a much larger prospect that didn't take as great a care of their body, to then be tasked with the conditioning that can come with an offense, a team that does want to get out and run with younger guards and that sort of thing. That's another reason to be optimistic for Mark Williams.
Even if he never grows in the ideal way in the NBA per se, I think that as he just naturally improves as an NBA player, because again, I know he was huge against college guys, but like 7'2" and 9'9" standing reach and 7'6" wingspan, like that's big against NBA guys. Like they always say things like you can't teach height, you can't teach speed. You can kind of teach speed, but you can't teach size. So even though he might not be like the most skilled guy in the top 12, 14, wherever he goes, I'd still be pretty confident in him having at least a pretty good NBA career just because he's enormous. I think that's a huge part of his draft profile.
No doubt. The size is the biggest thing that jumps off, and him using his size as effectively as he did on the defensive end of the floor. Seeing what the offensive game can come into is going to be so much fun for Duke fans to watch. I love the Cassius Stanley conversation that we were able to have a year ago on the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. Hate it didn't necessarily work out there in Indiana, but knowing that we've got so many Duke players in the NBA and that Mark Williams could be the next one to join the list, it's certainly a reason for the Duke basketball fans to continue watching, and hopefully there's a pairing there with the Pacers.
JJ, thank you for the time. Where can Pacers listeners follow you and your Duke stuff, especially with a draft less than 3 weeks from now, with potentially 5 Duke players getting drafted this year?
We're getting really close to the draft, which is always exciting. That's something that Duke fans absolutely live for. Just one draft pick a year ago, and to have more this season is going to be awesome. You can follow me on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_ and listen to Locked On Blue Devils daily to support the Duke podcast. And Tony, again, thank you so much for the invite, my friend.
Thank you for coming on. I much appreciate the time. Always going to recommend Locked On Podcast, and Locked On Blue Devils is your way to go for all the latest on Duke sports. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Tomorrow, back on the free agency grind, talking about shooting guards. Shooting guards, an interesting position for the Pacers. Could be a low need, could be a very important need, depending on what they do with some other guys. So stick around. You'll want to hear that. Everybody have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.